There are 1.5 million Syrian refugees here in Lebanon. In Canada, we only took 50,000 Syrian refugees in total. Just to give you an idea what it is like, Hamilton's population is 500,000. There's 3 times that number here in Lebanon. For me here living in Canada, the Syrian refugee crisis is close to home. Because in Canada, we also took Syrian refugees. But it plays very differently from 2 parts of the world. My PhD work focuses on the role of research evidence in informing decision-making all around the world, specifically in low-middle-income countries. What I believe our society needs today is for engaged, effective leaders to step up. We need leaders who are willing to listen to what the problems people are saying they have, to really go out there and immerse themselves in local communities so that the solutions they're putting forward are grounded in what people actually need. I've actually learned that from my boss. John Lavis is really good and very keen to make sure that he spells everybody's name correctly. And I thought it was very interesting because at Mac, you know, we have a lot of students who are international.
Yes.
And sometimes you can get the name wrong. But I learned that from him, the idea of really getting to make sure that the name is correct.
Yeah.
And often, sometimes when he mixes my name, because I have 2 first names.
Yes.
My parents wanted to be very confusing. My mom wanted the name Ahmed, but my father wanted Firas. So she gave him an ultimatum and told him she'll divorce him. Yeah, it's a true story. If he doesn't call me Ahmed, so then he came home and he said I called him Ahmed Firas. So I have 2 first names, which made my life super confusing.
Yeah.
But over time, I've come to appreciate people that take the time to understand that I actually go with Firas, not Ahmed.
Right.
And so, when they correct themselves and say, oh, I'm sorry, I called you Ahmed, but your real name is Firas. And it's a learning lesson for me now to always make sure that I know people's name.
Yeah, it's awesome. She was citing a story how when she was in her undergrad, her English professor said it would do like 5 people per day with attendance, and the entire year he never said her name strictly because it was difficult to say.
Yeah. And
my privilege is like, oh, it wouldn't bother me, but it probably would. So
well, some names are complicated. I think it's easier when your name is Mitch or your name is John.
Certainly.
But our names, the Middle Eastern names, and some names from from Asia, they're really difficult to get across. And at Mac, we have that difficulty all the time of trying to get the names correct because often our students don't actually go with the name they want to go with, right?
Yes.
It's different than the name they have registered. So reconciling that can be really challenging. As an instructor myself, I always find that to be the most challenging thing at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and what do you teach?
I teach a health practicum course at the McMaster Health Forum. It's called 4RI3. Okay. It's quite a unique course. It's a simulation course. John Lavis created it and I took it over. And the idea of the course is we want to make sure that our students, when they graduate, they have an idea or insight into what health policy is like on a domestic sphere and also on a more global one. So we go through the provincial government and the federal government cabinet meeting, and then we do a UN simulation. It's like a UN General Assembly, and then we do a World Health General Assembly. It's a tough course. We're very selective who gets accepted into the course because of the nature of the course itself. We expect the students to be, fast moving. It's a very fast moving course. So every week they would have a simulation. It's a 3-hour simulation, but the feedback has been phenomenal. I mean, there was a big conversation this year about offering it again or not because of the time demand that it puts on everybody involved. But the feedback from last year, our students, we just said, this is exactly what we wanted. We're always trying to find innovation in teaching. And as somebody who's been in academia for all my life and been an instructor for the majority of it, that's the struggle we have. How do you create content that our new generation finds interesting and stimulating? I remember myself, I'm 34 years old, but when I was younger, I used to resent the idea of didactic lecturing, right? Going into a lecture hall, sitting there and listening to a professor recite things off back in my day, it's funny to say that, but we had the whiteboard things where he puts it under a projector and he writes on it. And you guys now we have technology that I've never seen before. And its idea is that how do you use that? How do you use this technology in a way that we can get complex material to students in an innovative way? And the truth is, I see this more and more. The professors who are not keeping up with the technology and understanding the needs of our students are the ones that actually don't end up delivering or making an impact when it comes to academia. It's a challenge.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, some professors even do not allow laptops in classes. And I've had, what do you think about that?
So it's funny because last night I was at a dinner and I was talking about that because I said, I don't actually allow laptops because I think, really? Because I think the idea is that if you come to my class, hopefully the preparation is done and I want you to be in the moment. I want you to be able to engage with your students. I mean, listen, I've been there where I bring my laptop and quite frankly now I can have iMessage on my laptop, WhatsApp, it's open, Facebook is open, and I say I'm focused, but am I really focused? I mean, I do it in meetings now, even at the ministry level, whatever I am in the world, and I pretend like I'm taking notes, which I know I'm not, because you're just not in the moment. When you're forced to have everything away from you, and that's tough, because you're right, students don't like that. They want to have their, so you have to explain it. So I always say, people say, like, how do you get around that? So you communicate that. You reiterate over and over again why you're doing this. I think people, when they understand the reason behind your logic of doing things, they're more likely to agree with it. Doesn't mean you're not going to get the bad review here and there, that why are we not allowed to have computers. For the most part, I think they enjoy the fact that they're just in the moment.
Yeah, that's interesting. The only way I was able to get around that was to cite the fact that I was a note taker for student accessibility services. So Dr. O'Brien, he's like, okay, fine. And he used to comment already that I was chatty, so he did not want to give in on that to begin with, but he did. So that's awesome. You've mentioned John Levis twice now, and in talking with you before, you've brought him up a few times. Could you, I still feel like I need to know more information about him, because it was funny. I believe that a couple days after we spoke, I was at work at the McMaster Institute for Research on Aging, and I saw him pop up a lot on Twitter. So, but I still don't feel like I know enough. So if you could, please.
It's funny you say that, because I think that comes back to the nature of John. That's I'm coming to learn now. I've been with John for 3 years, coming into 4th. I think that's it's part of his charm, is that he's quite humble. And that, John is the guy, so briefly speaking, I don't like to go over his bio, because I think the website does a really good job of doing that. But John is I personally see him as the it person when it comes to domestic health policy, KT. And KT, by that, means knowledge translation. People ask, what is knowledge translation? It's simply put, it's the efforts to bridge the gap between research and policy and practice. How can we make sure that our decisions that are made on a domestic policy level, or even globally, are being informed by the best available research evidence out there? And John's job is to figure that out. He reviews the literature, he publishes a lot, he convenes deliberative dialogues at the forum, where we bring engaged stakeholders from everywhere who are looking for an answer to a question, but they want to make sure that answer is really informed by the evidence. And John does a really, really good job at it. And, seeing him in his element the past few years, I haven't met anybody like him. Now, there are others who do KT in Canada. We can't ignore them. There's Jeremy Grimshaw. There's many other notable names. John, I got to know him because I was looking for a PhD program 3 years ago, well, actually 4 years ago now. And I was sold. I was really, really sold on Mac. I wanted Mac. And then John put up he did something very interesting that I'll never forget. So we decided to speak on the phone, and I thought it was actually quite, he's an extremely busy man. He wanted to speak on his way home. So he lives in Toronto, and he stayed on his cell phone the whole entire ride back to his place. And to me, that was quite phenomenal that he's able to do that he's willing to take that, leap into speaking to somebody he doesn't really know that well. And it carried me through now. I often, students now would ask to meet with me for, career advice or whatever the case is. And I said, you have to invest in students. You must find ways to work around their needs and what they're looking for.
That's a great point. I want to go more into knowledge translation, but you made a good comment about students coming to you. And as someone who, is always seeking opportunities to talk to professors and instructors, what do a lot of students ask you? What do they want to know outside of, lecture or tutorial?
Well, the first thing they want is to change the grade.
Right, certainly.
Most often, that's usually the case. What they want is like a grade change. We're very good at, we have a very strict policies, obviously, with the Bachelor of Health Sciences is a very strict program, and we have code of conduct of how we go around doing that. But I actually find most students are interested in my journey. It's Mitch, I'll tell you the truth. It's very weird to me to actually even have this conversation now, because I feel like I'm still in my early 20s, which I'm not. Maybe it's denial on my end. But it's very odd to me that now others are coming to me for advice, because for the longest time, I was the one going, and I still am, going to find people to seek advice on career, on the way I think about things, the way I approach things. But I'm a product of a great mentorship. I had amazing, incredible mentors in my life that I can't imagine where I am now if it wasn't for them. And that can go as basic as like my mother, who plays an extremely instrumental part in my life, but also my former boss at WHO in Geneva, the World Health Organization. It could be close colleagues from one of my master's degrees in McGill. They all play different parts in my life. So I completely understand why students feel the need to come speak to me. It's becoming more and more difficult over time because my schedule is becoming really difficult to navigate lately. But I always find the time. I only ask for students to have a clear idea what they want to get out of this. What do they want to get out of the conversation? Because it's a waste of my time and theirs, and I respect people's time a lot. So if you're willing to engage in the conversation, I'm happy, but have an idea of what you are looking for. Lately, I think most of the feedback has been students want to know about the Syrian refugee crisis, which is my work, my scholarly work. But I worked at WHO in Geneva. I worked at MSF in Geneva and Abu Dhabi on the South Sudan crisis. So there's a curiosity about my career and my trajectory. I have a very odd, I guess, career path. You know, somebody who's done an undergraduate and medical school and 3 postgraduate degrees and worked here and there. People just want to see how that can be feasible and can they replicate that. And I always say every person has his own journey. I try to listen to what you are sort of looking for in life. But I also appreciate that younger people like yourself who are hungry for, I call it literally, it's hungry for knowledge and experience. And I wish more and more people would actually take the time. Honestly, because I think that the truth of the matter is we're only getting busier. Yeah. Life is only getting more difficult. Talk to any person in his 30s now, they tell you they don't have time for anything. So to find the time to actually sit for 5 minutes, it can change. It can see. I'm trying to think lately about the power of education and mentorship. I've been reflecting a lot about it, and I said, why is it important to actually invest the energy in people and education? It's because when you talk to somebody, this simple conversation between you and I now, I can almost often see the spark in somebody's eyes when you say something that touches them or that really gets at the core of what they're asking for. Because the reality is, what everybody wants to know is, do you really understand what I'm trying to get at? Do you understand my needs? And can you help me get to where I need to?
Yeah, it's so important. And you say it so eloquently. And like, I wish so many more people like viewed it like that. You brought up the Syrian refugee crisis. And that, you know, for me personally, I feel a lot of, you know, our ability to get to that point where we're, you know, dealing with those issues and, you know, using our appetites correctly. I think a lot of the time it's like clouded, at least for me, and being in my undergrad, you know, entering my 3rd year program, witnessing the amount of, say, identity politics or, you know, this like raw emotion. And it was just convenient you brought up the Syrian refugee crisis too. From a very basic level, how has your work empowered you in regards to understanding that crisis? Because as an outsider, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get credible sources. It's also very credible to engage in conversation, in tutorial. I think you get a lot of emotion out of people as opposed to, you know, their intelligence when it comes to these problems. And that's why I feel like as a social scientist, aspiring social scientist, there's a lot of problems with that. So,
of course. I mean, listen, I think the thing is about the Syrian refugee crisis that hits hard to me is I am a refugee myself, right? Like my parents are from Palestine. I am Palestinian refugee. I'm an immigrant to Canada. I'm a proud Canadian citizen, but also Jordanian one and Palestinian. So I can relate to what the Syrian refugees are going through on a personal level. I also can appreciate that. I love what you said. I love that, you know, it doesn't relate to everybody. Not everybody can. It pulls on people's hearts in different ways. Yeah. My concern with
reasonably so.
Correct. Yeah. Because I think that, you know, if you don't understand the struggles, the plight itself, the crisis and what's going on and how it affects humans on a basic level, it's very difficult, especially here in Canada where we're so sheltered in many ways. You know, we have a quality of life in Canada is remarkable. As somebody who's lived in many places around the world, I can tell you there's nothing like Canada, hence why people want to immigrate to this country. Having said that, I think if anything, over my time in the scholarly world and academia, I've come to realize that one of our biggest problems in education is the fact that our knowledge or our knowledge production, the way we produce research, or the way we think about what needs to be done, most often it doesn't connect to people's needs. So how often do you read things in the newspapers or a really cool article out there about the Syrian refugee crisis? And I always get the question is, well, does it really fill a gap? Is this really answering what the people need? The average, you know, Muhammad, who's at the border control trying to cross the border for safety and security, does he really care about some random policy you're looking into? Can we somehow do a better job at making sure that all research production in relation to the Syrian refugee crisis has somewhat of an impact on those populations? Because this is why, I mean, I this is my opinion, and I know I get a lot of heat for saying this, but this is why I think people so often find it very hard to hire PhD students and graduates, because they feel like you've lived in academia for so long, we can't relate to you, and you don't understand. No, but and you don't understand what the organization wants. You know, you're too much into academia, you're too little into policy and action. And this is what we need to change. We need to make sure that now all research really connects to people's needs. So whether you are an employer of a big multi-million company and you're making sure that, you know, if I'm doing a research about cool innovation and technology, that it really addresses the core of what I'm trying to get to. With the Syrian refugee crisis, for me, that was really what started it. I was very curious about the idea. It's actually started with the Ebola epidemic, to be quite honest. It was the time when I decided to go do the PhD, the Ebola crisis was happening. And through a conversation with one of my close colleagues, Joanne, who's now the international president of Doctors Without Borders, she told me the difficulty. We're having lunch in Montreal. It was like a random. She just came back from a post.
What'd you have?
I don't know. I think we had poutine because that was her favorite thing to have in Montreal.
Yeah, and reasonably
yeah.
so. Yeah,
and I'm not a fan of poutine, and people find that really odd. But I actually don't like poutine. Yeah. I like French fries. I mean, that's what I'm gonna have. My last meal in life will be a bowl of French fries and ketchup.
With a lot of ketchup.
Correct.
Yeah,
I mean,
I use way too much ketchup.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm the guy who goes to McDonald's and like picks all the ketchup. And it's actually a funny side story about that. In Europe, you have to pay for ketchup.
No, I'd be screwed.
I know, and I always find it like amazing when I'm like, oh, maybe I don't need 10 packs of ketchup. I guess I'll just do it with one. It's not the same. But we were having lunch and I told her, what's the biggest problem that came out of the Ebola crisis? And she said, the problem is we can't get the evidence to people in the field to make the decisions. People were dying. Ebola was killing people in insane rates. And it was this very scary thing across the board. So even if you lived in Canada and had nothing to do with Ebola and weren't so far away from you, people were still concerned in Canada. They were terrified at the time. And the Syrian refugee crisis even more. Why is it more? Because you're talking about families here. You're talking about a family unit. So think about yourself, think about your mother and your father and your siblings, and think now about each and every one of you being separated, forced to separate for safety and security. If you can just put yourself in those shoes, then you'll understand the importance of why everything in relation to Syrian refugee crisis must relate to helping those people out. Because the truth of the matter, my biggest concern, Mitch, is that most people now are forgetting about the crisis. That worries me. That worries me a lot. We must not forget that people are still suffering and the crisis is still ongoing. This is partly the reason why now I am in the process of securing access to the UNHCR campsites and the MSF sites, both in Lebanon and Jordan, to really talk to Syrian refugees themselves. Find out from them what's going on from the ground. Because my hope, my goal, I don't know if I'll be able to accomplish it, but my goal is to make sure that my research connects to them. And they know that people, even in academia, are concerned about their livelihood and how we're trying to make sure that they live a better life, improve the quality of life in some capacity.
Yeah, that's so true. And I agree with that all. And like, as someone like who all the research and all the evidence is over my head, I still have a large part of me that's like empathetic to the situation. Personally, I'm not even invested in it, and that's a privilege of mine. But I always see I'm so interested in the debate because it's such a poor debate, and the people represent it poorly. So what do you say to the people, you know, that say, you know, we have a homeless population that we need to work on in downtown Hamilton? There's tons of homeless people, and you know, don't get me wrong, that's one of the opponent's best arguments. I'm also talking about their poor arguments too. What do you think is the best way? Because I feel like a large part of what you're saying in terms of like getting the information in the field is sometimes getting everyone on the same boat so we can like move forward. Because that's not really happening. And you're right. I think that it's like a huge like problem. But as someone who's like, there's so much information, I have no idea what to assume. But I'm curious what you would say to someone who's extremely passionate about it, likely not that intellectual as you. But what do you say to those ignorant people about this topic?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I think it's a very informed question because you're right. It's hard to get people to relate the problem. So I think one thing is to raise awareness. And there's many ways of doing this. Podcast is one way, but you know, lately I've been toying a lot with the idea of so I'm a Queen Elizabeth scholar, and I was privileged to travel the world as a Queen Elizabeth scholar, and often I hear the word global citizen, and I'm sure you've heard it before, and it's one of the words I really do not like. Like I strongly dislike, because I dare you to ask anybody to define what a global citizen is, and for them to actually be able to answer that correctly. I don't even know what the definition of a global citizen is. No, I don't. And people will vaguely talk about this idea of giving back to a greater cause and that we all belong to the world, and great. So then lately, just in a run, one of the things I've been doing lately is trying to run more often. And on my run, I came to the idea that maybe to be a global citizen, you need to be a local citizen first, like a local role model citizen. So give back to your local community. So you bring up the issue of homeless and aging. Why should I care about the Syrian refugees when in my own community, people are struggling with homelessness and aging, right? And my answer to that is...
I didn't say aging, but you're right. That is something...
Aging is one issue. Senior population, we have a big issue in Canada now. How are we going to care?
In our fields.
Yeah.
That's our
and we should
strategy.
be concerned. That's our parents and our grandparents. I'm very
and
much...
us
yes,
soon.
and that's us soon. So the way we treat and the way we handle this is going to impact us in the future. I say, don't care about the Syrian refugees. Don't. If you're not personally invested in it, don't. But I only ask you that you invest in your own local community then.
Nice.
If you're not going to care about a global cause, then care about a local cause. Because the sooner each one of us does something on a community level, and it can be so small, huh? Yeah. It doesn't have to be something big. People always confuse this for me saying like, you must go plan the biggest fundraiser for your community. No, not at all. I'm saying, I have a friend, Sandy. And a great guy. And Sandy said something to me yesterday that just, honestly, I don't remember the last time I was so amazed. We were at dinner at his house, and he was talking about how, remarkable, actually, I'm still in awe of it. He was talking about how today he's hosting a dinner, okay? He was stressed about it. He went to Costco, bought all this food. And it's like, oh, I assumed he's having friends, like buddies over. And I was kind of offended that I wasn't invited. But I was like, well, who is it for? And he said, oh, I have to put up lights and put a string of lights everywhere. And I was like, oh, okay, in your backyard? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, what's the purpose? He's like, I'm doing it for the community. And he's like, what community? Like the gym community or like work community? He's like, no, my neighborhood. And I was amazed, Mitch. I was like, how? And this man is a very busy guy. He does not have time. Yet, he's somehow taking time out of his life. But he's like, I want to get to know my neighbors. So I am hosting a community event. I'm throwing all the food. I'm doing everything. He has help. I'm not going to neglect, because if he ever hears this, he'll be upset that I didn't say that he also getting help from other people. He is. But nonetheless, the idea that you can sort of... I'm not sure I'll be able to do that. I actually can honestly say, I don't know if I can do what Sandy does. And it gave me hope. It gave me hope. I'll tell you why. It gave me hope because lately I've been so terrified of the way the world's going and heading. And I'm not trying to be up in the clouds. I'm really realistic about that. I think that the nature of our lives is becoming so competitive.
Yep.
Right? I think we can relate to that. It's becoming really, really competitive.
In everything.
Yeah. Across the board, in whatever you do. And so I worry that we're going to come to a point where we forget the connection we have. And so hearing his story and his commitment to meeting the seventh neighbor down his street, he was talking about this couple that they just met, and he was so fascinated by them. He really hoped they would come, and he would waiting for, to speak to them, to invite them. And I asked him, well, how do you know you're going to have enough people? You bought lots of food. His fridge was stocked. And I was like, what if nobody shows up? He's like, I don't care. He's like, the point, I hope some of them do. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing, and as someone who knows Sandy, I'm in no way am I surprised, but I'm so amazed.
Yeah.
It's a Sandy, I'm not surprised because it's a Sandy move, and that's someone that I do look up to. It's something that I've tweeted before. I said think locally, not globally. And I just cited the fact that your local relationships and those around you are dying for the attention. So if anything, I would kind of press you on the argument that you would even allow people the choice, because which I'm kind of just blowing it up to be devil's advocate, but you did say global or local. I would actually argue for 9 out of 10 people, their energy would be utilized way more efficiently rather, if they process things with a local perspective. But nonetheless, I agree with you 100% that pick something and work for it. That action aspect that academia and research doesn't
I believe
offer.
in that because it's also incremental change. Right, I think it's little things that can make the big impact.
Right. Yeah.
If we're looking for that big, aha moment or that big change, it's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic. There's so much bureaucracy going on and so many hoops and loops that people have to jump through. But I will say that I will be stealing the think locally, not globally. So I will, if you hear it again quoted somewhere, it came out of this podcast. I heard it. Mitch said it first, but I am stealing it.
Yep, that's no worries.
I like that. Think locally, not globally. It's true.
Yeah.
In a way, I would argue that you also must contextualize the local environment you're in a global one, right?
Yeah.
Because it's different. It plays differently from one setting to another.
Yeah. And your local community, if you're so privileged, may not need the attention that, say, Correct. A community
Hamilton actually, not to interrupt you, but Hamilton Community Foundation is doing a remarkable work when it comes to that, huh?
I applied there.
Yeah.
I wasn't successful, but
I know people there now if you ever need the help, but
yeah.
They're quite phenomenal because I got involved in the whole idea of community foundations as a Queen Elizabeth Scholar through the Universities Canada, the Governor General's office in Ottawa.
A very prestigious scholarship.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I think that it is, and I'm very proud to be a Queen Elizabeth Scholar, as all my other.
It's a crazy title. Absolutely,
I know.
It's a very bougie.
There's actually
title.
a really funny
it's
story,
literally bougie,
which I found. Yeah, I found a really funny story about the Queen Elizabeth Scholar. Not a lot of people know, and I think your audience will appreciate the story if they're into it. But it's the only scholarship in the world that Queen Elizabeth has given her name to.
Really?
Yes, I knew that on an official trip with the Governor General, where they told me the story of how he was able to secure the name, and they were not sure she was going to allow it.
Yeah, I can see her.
Yep, he went. The Governor General, the former Governor General, went to the UK, met with the Queen, and like argued for the scholarship to be in her name, which is a huge honor for us. Mm-hmm. It's a global scholarship. We have a lot of scholars coming out of there. It's out of the McMaster Health Forum. Run coordinated by this phenomenal man.
Wait, it's only offered at McMaster?
No, a few universities have to apply for it. It's a very competitive process to get it.
I was gonna say that'd be a huge honor for McMaster.
Well, it's still a huge honor. We're one of very few universities that actually have it, and we were so lucky to have it. We applied again for renewal, and we got it.
And so you got it.
Well, I'm one of the scholars, but the forum got the scholarship for 4 more years, I think.
I see.
And the person to credit that really is both John Lavis, but mainly I think James McKinley. James McKinley has been a leader when it comes to Queen Elizabeth Scholar. He is the coordinator of many things at the forum, but he is our go-to guy for the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship and been an instrumental support for all of us. He believes in the mission of it. And so that's how I got to know about the funny story about how it's a huge honor to be called a Queen Elizabeth Scholar. And once you're a Queen Elizabeth Scholar, you're a Queen Elizabeth Scholar for life.
Really?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah,
and so you carry that title with you.
Congratulations.
And I urge everybody, thank you. And I urge everybody who's thinking about applying to please speak to us. Speak to other former alumni of QES program, and we're happy to share our knowledge and help you, navigate the process.
What's the secret?
The secret is you must be committed to want to strengthen health systems or social systems. So your work must connect community needs. Honestly, I think that's the answer now after years of being a Queen Elizabeth Scholar. I think that's what it is. Yeah. It's understanding that research no longer exists in silos. Knowledge can no longer exist in a silo structure. It's all collaborative process. One thing feeds into another. And one of my proudest moments in life is when I speak to another QES scholar and I'm amazed by the knowledge and the experience they have, because you have to travel for 3 months somewhere. And initially the first scholarship was about the Commonwealth countries. Now it's open to all low middle income countries and people traveling to really cool destinations. I'm blessed now. I'm going to be able to chance to go to Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon, and as part of as a Queen Elizabeth Scholar for the second time around. And it's a huge honor. I don't take it lightly. I'm very humbled by it. I'm very humbled by it, because I also understand the weight that comes with it. There's a lot of responsibility that I must carry on myself to respect the scholarship, the honor it comes with, the funding and the support. So I try to give it back by speaking to others about what the scholarship is about and what how they want to get involved and how they want to apply.
How competitive is it to be rewarded with the scholarship?
It's competitive. I'm not going to kid around that. Yeah, it is very competitive.
Is it like a grant writing? Like I hear a lot about that in the office and it seems very stressful.
So grant writing is a nightmare. Yeah. And usually this time of the year is when a lot of grants are due. So it's the busiest time, right? As you know. No, listen, it's like applying for the Rhodes Scholarship. You have to have excellent grades, simply put. I don't know. I'm not involved in the decision or selection process, but I'm informed about it by conversations with James. And we are looking for leaders. We're looking for leaders, and I think leadership and leaders emerge from very different backgrounds. Yeah, and I think it's so sad when people say there's only one type of leader. We could do a whole podcast about that. What does a leader now mean in today's world? What does a leader mean? So you and I briefly, when we talked before, I think one of the cool things that's going on now is like you have millennials in two spectrum. I always say in one end, you have people like you and people younger than you who are the beginning of millennials, sort of. And then you have people like me, I'm 34, I'm like the last cusp, like the verge of not being a millennium. Like I just made it. And so I think we are the ones who are actually going to create change. I'm more and more believing that. I think we need more people like you, like me, like others like Sandy, people that I know who are
Sandy's crazy.
True leaders. Matt in different capacities, in different domains. They're all leaders in their own way. How do you get them into a leadership position? I wish somebody had the answer for that. And I know there's a lot written about it, but I want to hear a compelling story of how do we make sure that our next future leaders are really addressing the needs of the future, not the current population.
Yeah, that's a big thing. There's an expression that I usually use for it, but I can't forget it. I can't remember it, rather. But that's a big thing. It's thinking about the generation forthcoming. That's rare. I talk about that. It's one of my arguments that I use to support cycling. Just because that's a sustainable method of transportation. Yet you still see a lot of opinion columns coming out, not supporting something as simple as bicycle lanes, let alone, this whole idea of making more sustainable transportation and whatnot. But yeah, no one really cares about the generation forward, and that's like a chronic problem we've all had. I'm guilty of it myself on a variety of platforms. It's so quick, right? Like we all want to, make it and move forward. We don't have time to think about the generation forthcoming. So
it stresses me out because I think about academia, and I think about the state of our universities.
Well, you make such great comments about when it comes to action. It's one of the reasons that I was compelled to take the cystic fibrosis campaign so seriously. So just for those who are not familiar, I bicycled 200 kilometers for cystic fibrosis, on behalf of the McMaster Social Science Society. So this is not essentially set up with the university, but it's a society and it's a part of the academia experience. And I actually just recently got invited to speak on a student success panel for how to get involved in school. So it's something that I think I do want to talk about, because you really got to overcome whatever adversity it is. Because, I can reflect this too. And I'm also interested in you yourself. If you got involved in school, because I would also like to hear your insights to take to this panel. But a lot of students want to get involved, but they don't know what to get involved in. And I have a feeling that that's what's going to be the rhetoric it's going to be incoming students. And I think a lot of them are going to say that they don't know what to get involved in, or B, there's some sort of adversity to overcome in order to participate. And when I thought about that, because I was expecting their two concerns, I think that's actually what helped me figure out, what I'm going to say for students to get involved, because the adversity that it is that the reason why you're naturally not involved. So if you have to think about being involved and it's like a horror deal, and you have anxiety about it, coming from someone who has anxiety, I can relate to that. I think it's about finding that adversity in anything, not just getting involved in student clubs, not even research or whatnot. It's everything. Find that adversity and overcome the adversity, and then make it your best bet to help that adversity for other people. And I think when you do that, it's way less work. So if you look at student clubs, find your interest, overcome whatever it is the reason why you're not already involved in it, and then help more people get in that way. Because I think people forget that the human experience, it's unique for everyone, but there's certainly a lot of parallels. And if people understood that, I think a lot of people would think of the forthcoming generations.
Well, I'll turn that around to you and ask you, why did you do the cystic fibrosis? 200 kilometers by cycling is not a joke.
No, yeah.
But where was that? Did you feel that was your way to do a local impact? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So we had a successful campaign for my partner earlier this year. She has MS. So we had a pretty successful campaign just using long text on Facebook. I'm pretty passionate about communication, so everything is typically calculated for me when it comes to those things, because I'm like your hardcore millennial. I was just so thankful for the amount of feedback and the amount of support we got from that campaign. And I was so proud of the impact that we did have. And I was so thankful for everyone. The amount of generosity we received from the MS campaign blew my mind, blew my partner's mind, and we were just so thankful. So when I was told that, hey Mitch, you got to do another campaign, at first I was like, I've saturated my industry. I don't want to keep taking, right? And so that's one thing that I've learned, from your core, self-help books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, is that it's important to offer value. So I'm like, how can I offer value? And I thought about my audience, and I thought about, the people around me. I'm like, well, I will suffer, in quotes, I say it in quotes because it's nothing compared to having cystic fibrosis. I will suffer, and I will do this 200 kilometers and hope that it can be an annual event, so that moving forward, we can all come together and it can be even more fun. Because for me, it's already fun being alone on the road. But it's just my way of, offering some sort of value.
Well, I think, that story needs to be shared widely. Your story needs to be shared widely, because I think people like you can inspire others like you who have a similar path and trajectory to get involved locally. And that's why I asked you the tough questions. Why did you do it? Because, you don't have cystic fibrosis yourself, and it doesn't sound like you have anybody close by that has it. You did it because you saw the need of your way of giving back. I always wonder, can we replicate that? Can we take?
What is it that encourages people to do that?
Exactly, and I'm okay with the idea of self-promotion, huh? So often people say like, "Oh, I did this because I wanted to get famous for it, or people to know me that I do good things," and I'm okay with that as long as the outcome is okay.
Yeah.
Right. As long as the outcome is for greater good and a greater community sense. So for me, I say whatever the cause is for you to motivate yourself and get to help the local community, do it. We just need to identify leaders among ourselves and support them to become a great leader. And that's essentially what you are. You're leading the path. I mean, from my understanding, your 200 kilometers, you were doing it alone, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very lonely path.
Just for this year.
Well, yeah, but that's a learning lesson, huh?
Yeah.
The road to success is often lonely.
Yeah, that's
often
a good,
alone.
Yeah,
what
true.
A beautiful lesson that is. That you're biking 200 kilometers for a great cause alone, and that's often the case.
Yeah, it helps. It's one thing that. So I'm a pretty big Lance Armstrong fan, and he taught me that you don't need to be a perfect person to make a difference. So
we're talking about the cyclist that got caught for the scandal.
Yeah.
Okay.
For cheating. Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. And to give the critics justice, he was a dick. He was rude. But he raised millions of dollars for cancer research, and he overcame cancer and won the Tour de France 7 times. So I mean, it's a huge debate, and if I had a cyclist on, I'm sure I'd be pressured with that. And I'm not that invested in it. But what it did teach me from reading his book was that overcoming that adversity is pretty difficult. So for him to be able to dial it in and overcome that to make a difference was pretty huge for me and inspiring for me, because he could have just gave up, right?
Sure.
He could have just gave up and then lived with the cancer.
I mean, I don't have a comment necessarily about Lance Armstrong because I'm not very versed in the topic, but I want to touch on something you brought up that I thought was really interesting. How do we get people like you and others to want to get involved in school activities?
Yes,
so we're just around the corner for school starting. I had many email requests to students asking me, can you tell us how we can get involved in MAC? What is there that is available? And here's the thing. As somebody who sat on many committees and know what people are looking for, whether it's medical school or undergraduate, whatever the case is, I always say you better have a story. Don't be somebody who does, and I am the first person to admit that I was that person who dabbled in everything under the sun. I would do a little bit of here, a little bit of there. Nothing really made sense, but it made sense at the moment. It was a great opportunity I didn't want to pass. But reflecting back on it, I regret that. I wish I can sit and say, this is my story in life. And let me show you examples of how I went about living my story. So if you're really interested in water sanitation, which seems to be a hot topic lately, then I want to hear about you going to remote areas where there's no access to clean and safe water and how you were able to help for that. So for example, you conducted research around clean and safe water. You then volunteered in an organization that specializes in clean and safe water. Have a story. I'm not saying don't be eclectic. Don't, do different things, but make sure it adds to some kind of theme, because the worst I find is when you get an application or you talk to a student and you just leave that conversation thinking, I have no idea what you stand for, what you're passionate about, what you care about in life. That's difficult. You're very hard to market.
Yeah, that's a very good point. To the individuals that say they've never had any experiences, what do you say to them? Because, there's some that say they've never had an opportunity to have a story. So,
well, I say that it's two ways. So people gave me a lot of hate for this, but everybody should know by now I'm a huge Oprah fan. So, and one of Oprah Winfrey's
What's your favorite book again for us?
I mean, The Wisdom of Sundays. Everybody should buy that book and read it. I've recommended it to others and they didn't necessarily think it was as great as I did. I still stand by my words. I think it's an amazing book. I just think that she speaks to something that resonates well with me. And her big thing is about how opportunity meets luck. That you prepare for the opportunity that comes, and then when luck and opportunity meet, things happen. And your job is just to work hard so that when the opportunity presents itself and when luck is on your side, you're ready to seize that opportunity. So I say to students who say that, well, I don't know, I never got involved, it never came my way. I say, well, you need to just work on yourself in the meantime. If you're in academia and you're a student, here's my clear message to you. Go to class, do your homework, get good grades. It's as simple as that. So everybody told me that. I didn't listen to it. I wasn't the brightest student. I didn't have the highest grades. Now I do, because I've come to appreciate that as a mature adult student. But at a younger age, I didn't. So my point to you is that, yes, you need to stand out among the crowd. Because guess what, Mitch? It's getting harder and harder for people to stand out. I always say, if I were to apply to medical school again now, I would never get in. And honestly, almost across the board, for anything I've ever got in my life, if I were to apply again now in today's world, I wouldn't get in.
Why were you not involved?
No, because I think I was involved, but I think the caliber of our students is increasing and becoming better and better and better. It's only becoming tougher and tougher to stand out. So you must find ways to be innovative. You must find ways to stand out. If that's what you want, because I can appreciate the other type of leaders, the reflective ones, the introvert. My best friend Ruby is very much that type. She's a phenomenal woman leader. She was the International Associate Coordinator for Doctors Without Borders, the biggest NGO in the world. I think it's one of the most phenomenal ones in the world that do great work. And she's not me. And we had issues in that. We clashed in terms of leadership. I'm a loud vocal leader. My presence is noted. And it can be obnoxious. It can be obnoxious and can rub off people the wrong way. I can appreciate that. She's the opposite. She's quiet. She's an introvert. She reflects. It annoys me because I want a reaction. But I have come, but I've come to appreciate that there's two types of leaders. And we must find ways to nurture both.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the leader that makes a ruckus. So Seth Godin uses the word ruckus, and that's where I get that from. But he essentially says that anyone that's invested in their craft, whether that's a politician or an engineer or a garbage man, they're an artist because their life isn't their career, A, and B, they have the ability to create a ruckus, to change their industry they're in, to change their relationships and so on and so forth. And that whole idea really resonated with me and actually impacted the way I think about influential people, probably in a way that bothers a lot of people because when you talk about, say, someone like Donald Trump, when people are engaged in conversations like this, I sometimes will hop in and be like, yeah, he's making a big ruckus. He's a good artist. And am I talking about his policies? No, because I don't really care to be that invested in it because I just don't have the time to, and I'm too busy on the road biking. But but I mean that though in the sense that I feel like the ones that are getting the most attention are the ones that are making the ruckus. And he's the king of making the ruckus because people are dealing with it. I mean, you look at like artists like Kanye West, like anyone that's big, they love making the ruckus and it works. So it's
most often,
most
not
often,
always, but yes.
It can, yeah, you're right. It can damage them in certain ways. But Seth Godin believes, like, he's like a diehard ruckus guy. He says, like, if that happens, you move forward and continue your ruckus. I definitely recommend the Icarus Deception book. It was very excellent book,
which is also in the Wisdom of Sundays for Oprah.
Oh, really?
Book. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, so
for people who are judging that book.
Well, to be honest, I think it's a better book now that you even mentioned that. That's a great point. I'm not too sure what people are going to say at the panel, and it's interesting because I think they're going to say, I don't know what to get involved in. And this is where you have to have that meme conversation about self-awareness. I mean, we all don't like this conversation. It's very trite these days, but it's important because how are you going to know what you're involved in if you don't use that self-awareness?
Absolutely.
And then your very simple ways of doing that. But I just don't know how to approach it because am I trying to tell these incoming first years to journal more, to like to find their self-awareness? So it's difficult. Do you have any piece of advice with, if someone is like, I don't know what to get involved with? For me, that's easy, but I don't want to just say like, oh, start journaling, lock yourself in a room, write down 5 things you are, and then like go from there. But
no, I would say completely the opposite, Mitch. I would say get out there,
right?
Talk to people.
Yes, that's very true.
Literally get out there, talk to people, because if you want to get involved in something that has impact and that will create a legacy for you, then you need to find a niche that is needed. What's the point? We don't need more students to work on, I don't know, like, I mean, I hear this a lot, like events planning for fundraising for better, I don't know, school cafeteria food. Terrible example, but I'm trying to get at is find a reason to get involved. And the only way you'll find that is get out there and speak. There's something about the power
Speak your truth.
Yeah, but there's something about speaking the conversation, having the conversation, and do more listening than talking. Listen to what people are asking is needed, because often people are saying it, you're just not listening to it. So my advice to students who are coming in: get out there and figure out what makes you happy by talking to others about what is needed in their own community. This is exactly goes back. It's a beautiful full circle, because it goes back to our earlier conversation about acting locally.
Yeah.
Right. Find that need. When it came. Okay, so the example I was giving out with the Hamilton.
It's so refreshing to hear that from such a distinguished intellectual like
I don't
yourself.
know about distinguished. I mean, I take it. I accept the love. I'm trying to do more of that. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me.
But you don't see that. And like, what are ways that the industry is doing that?
Well, I mean, there's different ways.
Well, I guess you're involved with Doctors Without Borders. And how is that NGO? I've heard great things about it, and it's a huge NGO that I hear of very often. Do you have anything to say about that? I mean,
listen, Doctors Without Borders, I think, is one of the most notable organizations in the world for the work that they do. I think they're very careful in that they go to places that nobody else does. So they're mostly focused on emergency situations, and they do incredible work. And I get asked the question, how can you get involved with that? How can students get involved? Volunteer. Pick up the phone, call them, email them. People are always looking for a volunteer out there to help them, make that impact, make that, get across the message of the organization. Often we just lack the courage to act on the intention. Right. So we need to somehow foster that courage, figure out a way to bring it up and alive. Because I have more hope. My big goal in life, or my big sort of wish in life, is that when we talk to each other, people are actually concerned about the possibility of a better life we live in. And lately, I've been having this dream, which is a very odd dream. But I always want to think about the moment where I would tell people, close your eyes, get up there, stand up, close your eyes, look around you. How many of the people around you do you actually know?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, I went through a bitter phase. For the longest time, I thought,
why do that though when you don't have to?
Well,
you just have to wake up and go to work for us. You don't need to.
I mean, yeah, that's true. But I always think, I refuse to believe that it's this dark in life right now. The point I'm trying to get across is I actually still have hope. But it took me a long time to reestablish hope in humanity, and that we are going to be good to each other, and that community involvement doesn't become the nature. It took me realizing that speaking to people like Sandy, seeing the work that he does yesterday, but even others, like from across the board, when I see somebody do a selfless act, even again when it's like self-serving in some purpose or another, but they're still doing it like you bike 200 kilometers. I can never do that. I will never fathom that idea. I will never even
I think you're going to be there next year.
No, I will not. I will be at the finish line cheering you on. Yeah, I will not be doing it.
Pretty sure you're going to be at the second annual Dundas Classic.
I will, but I will not be actually participating. I'm not that fit.
I think you are. I see you biking a lot with Sobe bikes.
Yes,
and you look great doing it, may I add.
I appreciate that. It's mostly for the Instagram, but it's my friends who follow me on Instagram know how obnoxious I am on Instagram.
I love your Instagram, by the way. And this is, while we're here, I don't want to, how do you, Dr. Firas, you
can call me Firas.
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. How do you represent this doctor and yet also come across as so charismatic, and you're silly, but that doesn't do justice. I think I need some more caffeine. I need my third Red Bull today, but you come across silly too in a great way. I mean, how do you do that? What do your colleagues think about that? Does that cause issues for you?
Oh my God, what a great question. So here's the thing. Life is very...
As a silly person, I need to hear this answer.
Well, I mean, listen, I'll say this. My Instagram account is very private. Right. And so I don't allow the whole world on it, because I do appreciate that you need to be professional in some settings, and people take things out of context. I wouldn't want that. But you bring up an excellent point. Listen, the truth is, I don't know why we can't have fun. It's as simple as that. For me, like, I believe that life is too boring otherwise. You need to find a way to make life interesting and entertaining. Otherwise, it's very dull for me. So Instagram story is my way of connecting to my friends.
It's unfortunate I can't tell all the viewers to reach out because you're semi private.
Well, I am very private.
And you're going to be
Instagram.
But anyways, one day we will get Firas to open up his social media.
I've been getting a lot of requests recently from a lot of my friends. It's like, you should go public, and I was like, nobody really cares. I have like 10 people.
You're
that
like
follow
a stock. Like Firas should go public.
Imagine.
Yeah.
No, it's just because listen, you get me like who I am, no matter what setting I'm in. Because the thing is, I'm not trying to sell who I am, right? I think my work speaks for itself. I don't need to prove to you that I am what I'm doing. And I think that more people need to have fun with it.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more fun. I now get really annoyed when I get invited to go to conferences and I look at and I ask, for example, what is the social calendar? And they roll their eyes. How dare you ask for a social calendar at a very high esteemed conference? And I said, well, why? The best conversations happen over coffee or a drink, right? Those are the best conversations. Yes. MSF at Doctors Without Borders, they're notorious for that. Our terrace in Geneva overlooks the mountains. It's a beautiful terrace. But any time of the day, I challenge you, any time of the day, go up to the terrace, the roof of the organization, and there are people there having drinks.
That's beautiful.
And deciding on life-changing matters. They're talking about stuff that is extremely sensitive.
Yeah.
Very important, that belongs in a situation-like room, yet they're in a rooftop having a drink talking about it. Because I think they understand very well that when you're dealing with complex situations, me as a physician, I understand that. I understand when things are difficult. I'm not a clinician anymore, just to be clear, but I'm still very much in healthcare, so I still get the decision-making capacity that happens with that. That why can we not bring fun things to serious matters so that we don't make our life as miserable? We're all trying to find a way to make.
We don't really like humor anymore for us.
No, I think we're finding very good. Some of us are very good at making sure that we don't enjoy the current moment. So my key, I lost my father very tragically a year ago, and one of the things that came out of that experience, thank you. One of the things that came out of that is appreciating more the sense of time, the sense of taking things easier. I'm still very much a strongly wired person, but
Firas was at work till about 2 a.m., 3 a.m.
It depends on the day. We were planning an amazing race for the physician assistant program, which bless her, the assistant dean Kristen Burrows is a phenomenal person. Everybody should apply to the PA program at McMaster because I think it's undervalued for the great work that program does. And that's another topic altogether. Is opening up your horizon, changing the demographic, changing the paradigm, the way we look at professions and career. Not everybody needs to be a doctor, huh? Not we need the next best teacher.
The cloak of authority. Yeah, so I had a class from Geraldine Voros, and it made me think very critically of the healthcare system. I speak with some of my nursing friends a lot about this, but it really changed. It doesn't. I'm kind of surprised McMaster did this. So this is Health Age 1AA3. In the first class, you learn. I guess it's not like health sciences, and it's like a social science class. So I'm not too sure how much you can speak to it, but my experience was that I became very critical of the healthcare system, which obviously is their intention. But I think of things as simple as, how we're dealing with mothers that just give birth and how it's like rapid fire, like literally, and how right when you show up to the hospital, it's because it's all for red tape, right? And this is a big topic that I have on communications, on marketing, because there's a lot of red tape, and it's all for liability. Because if something goes wrong with marketing, whether it's like literally a poster or a human, we don't care for the liability, so let's make it all the same from the start to the end. But this is obviously a very layman's understanding of that. So what do you think about that when it comes to, some of those critical... Are you familiar with kind of like that literature?
No, actually, I'm not quite familiar with it. So
yeah, so a lot of her class was just being very critical. Like, I guess it tied pretty closely to the pharma industry too. So I'm not too sure what your thoughts on the pharma industry are. But like we watched, and I don't really like his movies. I forget what his name is. Michael... I'm not too sure. It's like the big pharma movie, but Michael Moore.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
So it's like it was very like liberal and progressive in that sense. But what do you think about like that? Are you tied closely to the pharma industry? What do you think about that? Because as an outsider, it seems like that is like very heavily involved.
I don't know. I don't have. I'm not very versed about the role of pharma and decision making. I mean, of course, I know like anybody else who does my kind of work in health policy and health research that it is an issue. And as a clinician back in my day, that was a problem. The involvement of pharma in the way we treat patients. But that could be said now about a lot of organizations that are dictating public health interventions around the world, right?
Yeah.
So now one of the biggest conversations about the Gates Foundation and their role in deciding the priorities that come to healthcare interventions. And that can apply to anybody across the board. So it just takes time for us to have a critical idea and reflection about the role that every person does when it comes to delivering care. And so for pharma, I don't really have an opinion either way. But, you have to understand too, like pharma sponsors a lot of the biggest research out there.
Yeah, that's true.
And some of it is actually good outcomes. So I don't know. I don't know about, I think it's about disclosure. I think it's about being very transparent and who's getting involved with what. And maybe that is the road to sort of figure out the pharma involvement in healthcare delivery. I don't really have a strong answer for that.
No. Yeah, no, that's cool. It just seems like to me like a lot of the way we think about things is like to find a cure for them. This is something that I'm really excited to talk to Matt about, because he definitely deals with that like body part of the whole ordeal. And I feel like even with him, I feel like sometimes people, from my understanding, I don't want to misquote him here, but it seems that sometimes people come in with like, first of all, he never said this, but this is my interpretation of some of the, the highs and lows that he goes through in physiotherapy. It seems like sometimes people think that you can cure an injury or something of that nature, whereas it doesn't really work like that. And that's what I think, understanding that is what I apply to a lot of like mind things. So it literally is the whole body mind connection meme. But when it comes to dealing with that injury, I know it's a holistic experience, just like things are when it comes to literature and community needs, because working through it all holistically, whether that's exercise, nutrition, is so fundamental for your repairing of the injury. There's no pill for the body, and that's one thing that I like, that I think triggers people, and I think it should, because I think people should be like, oh, I can't just take a pill. It's like, no, you can't, and you can't just read one book. It's not how it's going to work.
I mean, absolutely true. I mean, you nailed it on the spot. Like, I think that's exactly it. The thing is, I think also our external environment is changing. And so we're having a harder time finding the right medication to treat the right syndromes. And so it all plays a factor. Yeah. I often see that with people who have overweight, and when they come for a quick solution, the reality is it's not as quick as having a surgery and you're good to go. You must change your lifestyle. You must show commitment and a desire to change your lifestyle. Because no surgery in the world will fix that. No. I can't give you a surgery to change your desire or your eating habits. Yeah, that's mental. That's you. That's on you. That requires your work from it, and that can translate to everything else. I think even in academia, when it comes to grading and assignments, I see it with my students all the time. They think that if they get an A+ on this, or you give them the answer to a question, that it's the way forward. But the truth is actually no. It's about your commitment to the course and what we're trying to deliver here, and being engaged in the environment that's going to yield the biggest impact to you, not the immediate grade you get now. Think about the long-term grade. Yeah. Think about your grade report in life. What do you want people to grade you? It's not about now and the A+ or the A- or the A you get, because MAC is very competitive. It's about how people are gonna give your report card. So I now play with this thought a lot in my head. At 50, when I turn 50, and somebody's gonna give me a report card on my life, what's my grade? I always wonder about that.
What do you think your grade's gonna be on your trip to Lebanon?
Well, very good, great segue. I'm optimistic. I am scared. I'm not gonna lie. I'm scared because I want to do justice by them.
Doctors Without Borders?
Well, no. I'm over the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship. The Syrian refugees. Right. Quite honestly, I'm very...
What you've been talking about this whole time. The
actual vulnerable population. Listen, I will never sit here and deny that there is a part of this that is self-promotion. Of course there is. I'm trying to get my research out there.
I think you're being too humble. There's no self-promotion. You clearly put in the hours of work to get here. You deserve it.
Yes, I'm sure, but there are some people who would say that they go to go see and be with the Syrian refugees and are not getting anything out of it. No, I am planning media coverage. I am talking to UNHCR campsites.
I don't like the whole idea that as someone that, once again, I'm a hardcore millennial when it comes to communication. I don't think that there is. You're right, and there is a stigma on that, and when it comes to like covering yourself through media when you do things. But I think once you get to the top, people realize it doesn't matter, because you have people at the top when it comes to communications, vlogging, content creators. All of the content they do is all self-promoted.
Yes.
And it impacts more people that way. People are very critical of that, though. We're finally getting out of that. Like, and that's why all organizations, McMaster University itself is adopting social media. But I bet in the beginning, they were like, no, we don't need to do that. But now everything that happens, boom, we need to have a story on it.
Because they're realizing the impact of it, right?
Like yourself, you're right. The impact is huge, because I was at work and you spammed my Twitter feed. your name popped up all over. But that's super exciting. So how long are you going for?
So my scholarship is 3 months duration. During that time, I'll be housed at the American University of Beirut, one of the best institutions in the world.
Yeah, my good friend Adam is from Lebanon. Yeah, I was saying earlier.
I'm excited to be there.
You said it was like a no-go zone, technically?
Yeah, well, some of the sites that I'm going to go to is not that safe.
What do you think about that?
So, I mean, the truth is this is where they live, and you must connect the research to them. I'm not going there as an individual person, just like rolling up. This is months and months preparation of trying to get security clearance to go with the organizations that are taking care of the Syrian refugees.
What language?
Depends on what context you're in, but Lebanon, they speak English, French, and Arabic. The Syrian refugees actually speak, some of them, all three. So it depends where you go. I speak English and Arabic.
Oh, awesome.
I used to say I speak French. I don't really speak it, but mostly English and Arabic.
So you're going to be on the field,
on the ground, in the field,
one-on-one.
Wow. I want to get to the core of what their issues are and tell them about my research and why I'm doing this
Anything
work.
You're expecting?
I'm expecting to be, I'm trying to have very low expectations, just for the simple reason that I'm really overwhelmed at the moment with the gravity of the situation. And I'm just hopeful, because as everybody who's in comms or in this world know, that things like this, when it's a sensitive topic, we're talking about a crisis situation, about vulnerable populations, things can change on a heartbeat. So having access today might mean tomorrow I won't have access to them. Nonetheless, I'm going to be working with one of the most phenomenal people I know from the Middle East, Dr. Fadil Jardali, who's a guy who's trying to really make a difference by connecting research to decision making across the level. So he works with ministers of making sure that their next decision when it comes to Syrian refugees is best informed by the best available evidence out there. And just being with him for 3 months and learning from his center, the Knowledge to Policy Practice Center in American University of Beirut, is phenomenal on its own. Having the added advantage of being able to secure access to the camps and meeting the Syrian refugees myself, it's a beautiful, beautiful way of making sure that my research connects to people that I'm really trying the research to impact in the long term. I'm not doing a PhD because I want another publication out there. I'm very clear about that. I'm doing a PhD because I want research to inform organizational management, but I also want it to help people. And so knowing that and understanding that scares me, because I don't want to exploit the Syrian refugees. So I'm very clear. We're in the middle of the conversations now with media people and comms of talking about how do we package this and how do we make sure that we get on top of this. We promote McMaster as the global institution. McMaster is the most intensive university in the world, research university in the world. Yep. Some of the best research comes out of Mac. How do I promote Mac, the McMaster Health Forum, the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship, but at the same time staying true to the Syrian refugees? And not exploiting their needs and wants and respecting their wishes. So I go with a heavy heart. I go with ambition and optimism that will turn out exactly what I hope it will. And I hope that I'm adaptable, that when I get there and things change, I can act on my feet fast enough. Because I think of, again, what Oprah said, I worked really hard for this. Here's the opportunity. Can I meet to it? Can I get to a point where I'm actually matching my hard work to the luck and opportunity that's coming my way? We'll find out.
Well, yeah, you're so right. And first of all, congratulations once again. Appreciate it. And I can't wait to hear you come back and talk about how the experience was. To push you on your ideas of when it comes to action, do you see yourself being in the role of dealing with the organization? Do you see yourself working with an NGO? So you're going to do this research. Ideally, what would happen with this research?
I've been thinking a lot recently about what I want to do next and where I want to go and what makes me happy, because it changes all the time. And I urge all the students who are listening to this podcast to allow yourself to go there. Continuously challenge yourself to think of different ways. So you asked me whether I would see myself getting involved in the organization. I worked at WHO and I worked at MSF. I know what that kind of work entails. I'm not afraid now to openly say that I kind of wonder how I would be as an ambassador to Canada. I'm actually thinking about that. I mean, it's not a
neutral bureaucrat.
Well, yeah,
there's a lot of positions open that are. I think they're gonna grow too with communications opening.
I think so. I think I want to represent the Canadian brand across the world, Canadian values and what we stand for as Canadians. And as somebody who's a refugee and an immigrant and a dual citizen myself, I come to appreciate what Canada has to offer, I think, on a different level. Because I know what's not offered in other countries. Yeah. And so I really, really don't take what we have in Canada, our access to free healthcare, our social system in many different ways. I don't take that for granted, I am very aware what that means. And it makes me a lot more appreciative of the opportunity to live in Canada, to flourish here, to interact with other Canadians like myself, and understand what it takes, what it means not to have all that. So for Syrian refugees who has no access to healthcare, you have to remember most Syrian refugees have a problem with chronic diseases. The number one cause of health concern is chronic disease. But what's the thing about chronic diseases? They need medication. They need follow-up. They need to see their doctors, right? Well, what are you going to do about a Syrian refugee that's trying to flee his country because of security and safety? Where is he going to get that follow-up or she? Where are they going to get that medication for their diabetes or their hypertension or their heart disease? Yeah. Those are tough questions.
Yeah, and I think the tough questions also need to be asked, how do we get the people on board that are saturating this whole debate? Because like you said, you see very passionate and not informed arguments that say, we don't have time for the Syrian refugees. What do you think about the neighborhoods in Europe that you hear that are no-go zones? And when so many Syrians come over, there's issues with, they go as far as, not to be dramatic or clickbait here, but they go as far as saying that there's rape issues and so on and so forth, which obviously I know are problematic because they don't really cite much information. But what do you think about that?
Listen, I'll say this. There's something that really moved me the other day, and I don't want to quote it because I don't know how it's properly stated, but it said, they came for me, and it was along the lines that they came for me, I didn't stand. They came for them, I didn't stand up. They came for somebody else, I didn't stand up. Then they came for me, and nobody stood up. I'm really paraphrasing here. I know it's very different than that, but the message here is that we need more people. Even though you cannot relate to Syrian refugees, you need to be able to understand why it's important that you are invested, that you care to give back, that you care for their livelihood, because one day it could be you. And that's not, actually, it's crazy to me that it's not far from reality now. When we look at the Trump administration, we look at what the US is doing with all kinds of people, with all kinds of backgrounds. This could be anybody. It could be a Caucasian person tomorrow that people start to attack. And so that is the truth of the matter is. I'm not saying that everyone needs to get up there and like fight for the Syrian refugees. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is find a way to help the crisis. Right. Find a way to get informed about the crisis first. Why is it a big deal?
What do you think about Justin Trudeau's approach so far with the Syrian refugees?
Well, one thing I learned in life is never talk about politics because you always, you never can do it right. You can never, I've never found a conversation that was somebody came on top because of it. So I tried to
He's been doing a lot.
I do. I think
he's been doing a lot for the Syrian refugees.
Well, yeah, we've taken the most number of refugees in the longest time under his administration. I think Justin Trudeau committed to it and delivered in the number of refugees that came into Canada. Whether we're doing a good job of it the way we're taking care of now, I think we are for the most part. I think Syrian refugees are happy in Canada. Although, I was in Newfoundland just recently, which I recommend anybody who's listening to this podcast to really go visit our country. Travel Canada. See your country.
Yeah, I've seen that as a rebuttal for the Syrian refugee crisis. Some people say, why are they all coming to Toronto?
Oh, yeah, but Newfoundland accepted a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
But none of them, apparently, when I was talking to locals there, they decided not to stay.
Yeah,
the weather was so bad for them.
Right, yeah. Which is reasonable.
It is, but also it got me thinking, and I know this sounds a little bit very crazy for me to say this, but I was like, wow, you just escaped a crisis, a war zone. I mean, Syria is a war zone.
And that's a big rebuttal that I hear. Like I say, I'm pressing these arguments because I apply your exact arguments with like a lot of other domestic issues, such as anything important, like you said, like think globally. And I find I use the exact same arguments to support that, but they're not successful. And it seems that a lot of the rebuttals against are the same ones that are for like Syrian refugees. So, some people say that, and it there's some validity to that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, you can't, what applies to you doesn't apply to others. And the point I'm trying to make here is that just because you think it's crazy that Syrian refugees are not happy in a place like Newfoundland because of the weather, I'm not saying all of them, but the ones I talked to in the ground said that, a lot of Syrian refugees left Newfoundland because of the weather. You can't expect others to live your life preferences or your choices. We must be understanding that people have different needs, and how do we actually cater to those needs is the big question. What is the future of Syrian refugees in Canada? I think they're going to flourish. I think they're well integrated into our communities. A lot of them have become leaders within our own communities and are finding innovative ways to give back. I love it when I open the Huffington Post and I read a beautiful story about a Syrian refugee who decided to open a bakery and give free food on a Friday to the homeless people. Because I'm like, bravo, this is what we need. We need to show that there's a way for you to take in refugees and they can flourish in your communities. Because you're absolutely right, Mitch. There are parts in Europe where refugees in general, yet alone Syrian refugees, are not acceptable. They're not accepted, they're not welcomed, and they're attacked for being a Syrian refugee. That's unacceptable to me. Yeah. Because the truth of the matter is the world's big enough and there's enough resources for all of us. We just need to figure out a way to live with each other. That's, I think, what the new conversation will be. If you ask me now, what's the big trend going to be in 2020? And when it comes to conversations about how to change, create a positive change in the world, I'll say it's how do you live with your neighbor? So if I were to write a book, it'd be the title of that. How do you live happy?
Sandy will help.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Sandy, I think will probably be a better person to write the book.
Have a lot of food.
Yes, and put string lights. He's very innovative and very creative in the way he hosts events. He's actually an amazing host.
He has the coolest glow bike. When I went to Glow Riders, he has a phenomenal glow bike. And he even made fun of me for having like 3 lights.
Yesterday, we did the glow ride yesterday actually in Hamilton. And
I saw that.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it's Hamilton once a month getting on bikes and everybody lights up their bikes around the city. It's a beautiful, beautiful initiative. I wish I was more educated about the movement. I think there's a reason behind it. I'm not quite sure what it is. And I think
it's just like the cycling infrastructure and the cycling community in Hamilton.
Is that? Okay.
I assume that's what it's for, like to
promote cycling.
Well, because I mean, we're coming to the end here, and I could go on about cycling for forever. But when it comes to cycling, I think like a lot of the community doesn't necessarily care about it because why do you have to? So I think events like that are trigger a lot of people because it's bam, there's 500 people on Glow Riders legally riding on the road.
Correct.
So they have the right to do that, but it's hard to resonate and hit home with a lot of people on that subject. So I think that's why there's initiatives and events like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as somebody who's taken biking recently, I was not really a biker before. I'm enjoying it. And I'm terrified to bike on Main Street because the traffic is insane. But I love biking. And I wish that more cities were like that. You go parts of the Middle East, you can't even walk. Yeah. So the idea that we have bike lanes is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, Dr. Firas, this has been amazing. Is there anything else you would like to close with? Anything that we
please don't ever feel the need to call me doctor. Anybody who's listening to this podcast or sees me outside, please just call me Firas. I don't actually recognize it when people call me doctor. Yeah. I have nothing to add. I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody, to have this conversation. I loved it. I think it was very informative and it got me thinking about a lot of different things. And so I appreciate the patience of people just tuning in for this long. I could go on for forever. So thank you for your patience, and hopefully we'll touch base again soon.
That's awesome. Is there what are 3 things you are grateful for us to end with?
Wow. Loaded question. 3 things I'm grateful for. Family.
Yep.
I mean, I know it's very cliche, but it really means a lot to me recently. Laughter. I wish I could laugh more. And when I do, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for laughing because sadness can take over sometimes. Knowledge. Yeah, I'd say knowledge. The more you know, the better you do. So get out there. Know better. Know more. You'll do better.